Hey YouTubers. As promised, I shall now proceed to tear the user WILLYWILL1984 a new one. Even though I must admit that halfway through watching his video again, I kinda lost the urge to even deal with him at all, so if I seem rather blunt at any point, that's probably the reason. Anyway, I'm gonna have to do this slightly differently from what I usually do, because this guy's video is over 10 minutes long, so if I did it the way I usually do, we'd be here all night. So I will be editing heavily in what he's saying. There's a linky over in the description box for his original video if you want to watch it. Okay, let's rock and roll.
Finally, I'm going to prove to you all why atheism is a religion. Personally, I have nothing against atheist people. But when I do get responses from those who claim to be atheists and they're so overzealous about their beliefs and you don't want to start the cussing out, well, yeah, of course I'm going to take offense like anyone would.
Which would explain why you've disabled commenting on your video, and also how you managed to get on the most responded lists without anyone except yourself actually having an approved response on your video. It doesn't explain how you came to have the audacity to post this under education, of course, but let's not get into that. Moving on.
One video caught my attention. It was made by a YouTube user, GoldGreen18. Not a bad-looking girl she is. But
well, I guess we don't disagree on everything then.
Well, I'm going to start with, let's say, for example, the claim is there's no dogma, but on the contrary, there is. And as usual, I'm reading this off my screen because I had to write these notes down, because they're a lot. Okay, this is atheist dogma.
Oh goody, this ought to be good facepalm fodder.
There is no God, no miracles, no soul, no afterlife. Anyone who says they've experienced God's presence or has heard God speak to them, their religious beliefs, holy books make them very much delusional.
I like that little blinking text you have on your screen there. It almost obscures your dumb mug. It is, of course, also a complete lie, but I guess that doesn't really bother you. First off, the only one of these that has anything to do with atheism is the first one, and I have yet to meet an atheist who will say, with 100% certainty, that there is no God. As for the rest of them, atheists can believe many different things about these. I've met atheists who believe in ghosts, spirits, reincarnation, all kinds of kooky stuff. Doesn't mean they're not atheists. All that atheism is, and I guess you actually are the last person on the planet to get this memo, is that the atheist does not believe in your gods, or anyone else's gods, because frankly there's no evidence for them. That is all. Thank you. Moving on.
Chemicals just so happen to mix together to start life, aka the magic ooze. Their creation story. Temporary pleasures are worth it, so go for it.
Wait, how did the scientific field of abiogenesis suddenly become part of atheism? Also, that's hardly a, quote, creation story, unquote. It's just a story about the origin of life, which, contrary to theistic claims, isn't really all that important to the rest of the universe. As for your little text, then yes, you could claim that God, whatever that is, used those chemicals to create life. You would of course have to back that up with evidence before anyone would take you seriously, but yeah, you could. As for temporary pleasures being, quote, worth it, unquote, yes, some are indeed. All pleasures are temporary, and some are worth what they take to achieve, others aren't. Being able to tell the difference requires some skill, which I guess you don't have, so it's probably easier for you to just dismiss them all. You must have a dead boring sex life, though, assuming you have one, of course. Moving on.
Remember, when you're your own God, you make your own moral decisions.
As do most Christians. If they didn't, they would be busy stoning homosexuals, not wearing mixed fabric, selling foreigners off as slaves, marrying off their daughters to rapists, etc., etc. And anyway, I am not, quote, my own God, unquote. I simply don't believe in yours. So yeah, fuck you too, buddy.
We believe God does not exist because there is no physical proof of God. Now see, that's atheistic doctrine right there.
Yeah, at about the same level of comprehension as believing every snake can talk and that virgins get impregnated all the time is Christian doctrine. In other words, you, sir, are full of shit, and it would be nice if you would bother to do just a tiny bit of research and maybe even a minute bit of thinking before you opened your mouth and started yapping up bullshit. And this time, I have to tell you, the text on your screen doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now, that can mean one of two things, of course. Either I am bad at reading English, or you're bad at writing it. Since English is my second language, I'm not going to make any definitive judgment either way, but I can venture a guess if need be. Moving on.
I know that archaeology and anthropology are sciences as well, and they have proven most of the things, and I say most of the things, to be accurate in the Bible, such as the land, the existence of most of the people, and so forth.
Oh, really? Then how come the links you have in your description box and the articles you show in your video, and I'll duplicate those links here, contain absolutely no evidence for any of this? If this is the best you can come up with, the fact that 5,000 years ago there was a written language in the area that resembled early forms of Hebrew, if that's the best you've got, then whoop-de-doo, you haven't provided evidence for anything except two things, Jack and shit. And Jack left town. You also have a link to an article from UPI called City of David Claim Reinforced by Find, whose only backup for this is that there was a wall in Jerusalem at the time. Once again, whoop-de-doo. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to do better than that.
So there are no leaders supposedly, but no, that's not true. Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, etc.
I wonder if you're familiar with the meaning of the word leader in English. It's someone who leads, who commands, who's obeyed. I hate to break it to you, but I don't give a shit what Richard Dawkins says. I'm not obeying his commands. I may agree with many of the things he says, but so what? I agree with a lot of the things a lot of people say. That doesn't make them my leaders either. If I agree with Newton about the laws of motion, does that make Newton my leader?
You know what? Buddhism is pretty much a religion itself. Though they have their rituals, they are still atheistic because initially they don't believe there's a God.
Yes, that is correct. Buddhism is an atheistic religion. That is, a religion that you can follow without believing in the existence of a supernatural deity. But that doesn't make atheism a religion. That makes Buddhism a religion. It is possible to be religious and an atheist, but it is also possible to be non-religious and an atheist, just as it is possible to be religious and a theist, or non-religious and a theist. If you can't spot the flaw in your own argument, then I'm going to have to call you a moron. Sorry, but there you have it.
Well, of course, I mentioned the zealous atheist. Well, when you have zealous faith in your belief system, you become, activists going around trying to get God banned from schools and all this. That's signs of, atheism being a belief right there.
So if I become, let's say, an anti-racism activist, and I protest against racism in public institutions, for instance, does that make anti-racism a religion? Come on, are you really this stupid?
Now, if you want to go to the psychological arguments, you have atheists that claim that, God is some made-up thing to acquire, some kind of comfort. Of course, then the same thing could be said about an atheist who's trying to come up with the comfort. There is no God, so they're not responsible for their actions. Because remember, when you're an atheist, you supposedly have no specific doctrine to go by, because when you are your own God, you determine what happens. That's right.
Okay, that's just bullshit. I may not be responsible to your invisible man in the sky, but you know what that means? All that means is that I am responsible to real, actual, living human beings for my actions. When I do something wrong, I can't just pray for forgiveness. I have to actually ask a real living person for forgiveness. I have to actually come out into the real world and say, you know what, I fucked up, I'm sorry. If you suddenly lost all belief in a God, would you then suddenly start murdering, pillaging, and raping left and right and center? If you would, then by all means stay a believer. Keep your silly superstitions, please. Because then you're a psychopath. But you see, the rest of us aren't. We can figure out how to act without having the threat of hellfire hanging over our heads. If you wouldn't do that, then this argument is dead from the word go, and you would know this if you'd bothered to think about it at all.